vice president had no idea about. Right? Does anybody know who the next president is?
Truman.
President Truman. Very good.
The Truman Show.
Okay. So on April 25th, 1945, President Truman is briefed on the Manhattan Project and decides that they're going to continue on with developing an atomic bomb. What does briefed mean? You're briefed on something, Casey?
Like they just give them the information about the project.
Yeah. Basically, there's a meeting with him and some of the leaders of Los Alamos. They say, listen, this is the work we've done, and this is where we're at. Here's the goal of this project. It was a secret project under FDR, and we think that it's a good idea to continue working on it. And Truman decides that it was as well, and they're going to continue to work. And at this point, they're getting very close. It's 1945 now. Right, so they're getting close to the end of the war, and they've had a lot of success in their studies.
If you think about it, this wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. It was not that long ago. All right, then in July, they actually have their first successful test. So they go out into the middle of the desert in New Mexico, they drop a plutonium bomb, and there's the first atomic blast in human history. The biggest, most deadly weapon that many believe could be the end of humanity as it is, was developed. Okay? First time it ever worked, and it was July 16th, 1945. All right, so now the United States are the only country in the world that has atomic power, that has the ability to use atomic weapons. Okay, so even though we had already been making a lot of progress, obviously we're all the way up to Okinawa. We've had the D-Day invasion by this point. We're making progress in Europe. Now we're also have the most powerful weapons in the world. All right, so once this weapon's developed before the Nazis are, it basically makes it so that this war will be sealed and ending. Right?
Wait, did I do this wrong?
What would you do if you were President Truman and you had this new technology now?
Use it to negotiate.
Okay, use it to negotiate. So what do you mean by that?
Threaten them with it.
Threat.
Yeah. All right. So you give him a threat. Yeah.
Well, I would just drop it on them and say we'll drop another if you don't surrender.
Okay. Well, luckily you're not the president, because that would not be a very humane move to do.
What did he say?
Go in war.
Shh.
Yeah, it would.
What did he
Very
say?
well.
Shh.
Because if we tell
Shh.
them,
Well, you're about to find out if it worked. Okay. So before they dropped the first one, before they dropped any or used any atomic bombs, they said, "Hey, Japan, listen up. We're going to give you something called the Potsdam Proclamation, which said, look, we have this brand new weapon. It's an atomic bomb. It makes a really big explosion. You will be in a very bad place if you don't surrender now. So please surrender. We really don't want to use it. We don't want to have to kill any civilians, but we need you to surrender." And it was signed by many of the world leaders, not just Truman, but he's obviously spearheading it with being the ones that have the technology.
Wait, didn't Einstein help him out with it?
Einstein did not work on the project.
I thought he drew up the thing, like how to build it.
He didn't, because the reason why is because of Einstein, like being the pacifist that he was. He said that he would not have been able to live with himself if he helped develop it. But he did advise that it should happen.
Well, my old history teacher is terrible. He said Einstein helped out with
Sorry.
it. Middle school days.
Okay, go forward.
1 second.
All right, do you guys think they accepted it?
nope.
No.
Thanks, no.
They
No.
probably tried to call bluff again, like last.
Because they probably got one too.
No, they don't have any. We're the only country in the world that has them, Chaz.
Yeah,
As of right now.
so we say.
In 1945.
Wait, when did the Russians develop their first nuke?
1947. So then, just as you guys all guessed, all right, the Japanese are going to reject the Potsdam Proclamation and say, yeah, I don't think that that's true. Even if it was, we could still defeat you. We're the most superior people in the whole world. we've got the best army, and everyone was very brainwashed. So it just there wasn't much of a chance that that was actually going to work out.
That's what Hitler and Napoleon said.
Yep. So
Freaking arm there.
here's the big question. All right. Now that they've rejected it, right? You have to follow through on what you said.
Now we can.
So we're going to use the atomic bomb. Where would you use it if you were the president?
The
What?
most
Tokyo.
populated area.
Tokyo. Where else? Any other ideas? Where?
I want to see what Chaz said, the most populated area.
That's what I said.
Most populated area?
No, you said.
Why?
They dropped them on the.
Quiet! You have to raise your hand to talk. What?
Because they're like highly populated areas, but they're not like the most populated, so less people would be killed.
Okay, so you're saying just a big city to make a point, but like let's not destroy the whole place. Yeah.
Did they drop them on the cathedrals? That's what Mr. Cooper told me.
They could have, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
The military base.
Yeah, well, I would drop it on like a giant like military base or like government, like a government facility, like an area that's not too populated with like actual civilians, or like more like with soldiers or government officials.
Okay, good. So people that would not be completely innocent, right? Good. Yeah.
Didn't they dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they were industrial powerhouses. There were a lot of there was a lot of military stuff going on over there. So not only would it cripple their economy, it would cripple their military.
All right. So listen up.
Oh
You don't need to write this. So this was the write-up from a meeting that they had to discuss what places they would target. Okay, the first number one on the list was the city of Kyoto. This was the second largest city in Japan. It was home to over 1 million people. It used to be the capital, but things had moved, and it was also the cultural capital. All right. Number 2 was Hiroshima, because it was a big industrial area. There was a big army base there as well, so it seemed like a good place to attack. All right. Interestingly enough, you don't see you don't see Nagasaki anywhere on this list. You don't see Tokyo. In Tokyo, what's interesting is they never used an atomic bomb there, but they used these other bombs called incendiary bombs, which basically would drop it and would cause a fire to form. They actually killed more people, more civilians using these incendiary bombs in Tokyo, over 100,000 than were killed from the nuclear bombs that they dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So it's interesting to see that. But so why didn't they, does anyone know why they didn't end up bombing Kyoto? No? So very interesting. At the time, the Secretary of War, which is one of the top military positions in the country, him and his wife actually went on their honeymoon there. And he loved the city so much that he was able to convince President Truman that it should not be the target.
So he
Because
must be their savior then.
he just wanted to go back there one day. And it worked.
Did he go back there one day?
I'm not 100% sure, but
He probably
I bet he did. I bet he did. So that's why they didn't bomb there. All right. So then Hiroshima would be the next target. On this image, you'll see some of the explosions. On the left is the Hiroshima explosion. On the right is the Nagasaki explosion. Does anyone notice a difference between these two? Earl? Okay. Yeah, the Nagasaki explosion's bigger, right? Yeah, Justin.
Oh, I was gonna say because they dropped the little boy on Hiroshima, the fat man on Nagasaki. The little boy was uranium and the fat man was plutonium.
Okay, so the first one was actually plutonium
And the
on
second,
Hiroshima. The reason why, but you're still on the right track here, the reason why the explosion's bigger at Nagasaki is because it was called an H-bomb, which you're going to have to ask your science teachers for a better description than I could give on what makes the H-bomb more powerful, but it has something to do with chemistry and it makes the explosion
I
stronger.
know.
It's because it does something instead of splitting an atom, it like shoots a hydrogen atom. But we're not going to get into that. I know you'll learn about that in physics before you
I already
graduate.
know.
Okay. Shh. So.
Where did this stuff?
An atomic bomb?
please be quiet.
Dude,
Alright, so the atomic bomb was first dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. It was dropped by an aircraft called the Enola Gay, and was dropped by Colonel Paul Tibbets. What's interesting, or I guess kind of crazy about the way the bombs work is as soon as it drops, right, everything within a 5-mile radius is completely destroyed immediately from how much energy there is coming off the bomb. All right, and it would there's so much heat that everything kind of burns and disintegrates. It actually leaves a thin layer of almost like a glass-like substance over the whole area from the heat. Okay, from how it melts everything.
After it went by, didn't it like leave shadows, stains like on the walls and floors and
Yeah,
stuff?
very good. So it left, when the bodies would like kind of be burned into the ground, it would leave what looked like a shadow. Very good, Chaz. And it would get stuck under that layer of glass, so to speak. All right, so it was, the power in these are pretty incredible. All right. What's interesting is, after you drop the first one, we didn't actually plan on dropping a second. We then reached out once again to Emperor Hirohito and Hideki Tojo and said, please surrender, we don't want to do this again. But that was once again rejected, and we end up dropping a second atomic bomb. Now, why Nagasaki? It wasn't even on that top 6 cities. Well, as we were heading for one of the other cities on the list, there was bad weather that the pilots had to avoid. And you had a very specific amount of fuel, and when you're carrying such a heavy weapon, right, they weren't actually going to be able to get back to the aircraft carrier they took off from if they had to carry the bomb any further. So because of that, they radioed in and said, hey, we're flying over Nagasaki, can we drop it here instead, because our